Hello, welcome back to the Old Testament prophets. I'm Jerry. In the last two classes, we've focused on the prayers of Jeremiah. And now I think it would be a good time to zoom out and consider the historical picture of Jeremiah's time, along with more on Jeremiah. So let's consider three of the last four kings of Judah: Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, and Jehoiachin. There are also two other persons that figure prominently in today's story: King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylon and Pharaoh Necho II of Egypt. Both of them have their eyes on Judah, as we'll see. We'll also cover today the first two of the three deportations from Judah. We've been talking about that looming Babylonian captivity, a time when most of Judah will be taken away to Babylon. That captivity happened with three deportations. We'll be using 2 Chronicles 36 as our base, and along the way I'll fill in some history. So let's get rolling. 2 Chronicles 36, And the people of the land took Jehoahaz son of Josiah, and made him king in Jerusalem in place of his father. So here's Jehoahaz. Don't blink, because he won't be here long. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. The king of Egypt dethroned him in Jerusalem and imposed on Judah a levy of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. The king of Egypt made Eliakim, a brother of Jehoahaz, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim. But Necho took Eliakim's brother Jehoahaz and carried him off to Egypt. Well, this might have been the first time Jehoahaz was not glad to be that firstborn oldest son who gets the throne from his father first. Pharaoh Necho immediately took a dislike to Jehoahaz and replaced him with his brother and renamed his brother Jehoiakim. Jeremiah tells us that Jehoahaz, that eldest, died in Egypt. And what's this with Egypt? I thought Babylon was the major power. Well, Babylon will be the major power, but between the end of Assyrian dominance and the beginning of Babylonian dominance, Egypt made a grab to control Judah. So, in review, Assyria had dominated the Near East for about 200 years. It was Assyria that took Israel into captivity in 722 BC, 113 years earlier. They also conquered the cities of Judah, but with the prophet Isaiah and King Hezekiah praying, the Lord saved Jerusalem from the Assyrian army. Now, you might remember that story we covered. But in the time of King Josiah, Assyria waned in power with weaker rulers, and Babylon to their south was finally able to achieve their independence from them. Then Babylon started rolling up Assyria like a carpet east to west. Ashur in 614, Nineveh in 612, Haran in 610 and 609 BC, and then that last stand of Assyria at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC. Egypt, formerly at odds with Assyria, gambled by allying with Assyria against this new threat of Babylon. Egypt recognized that Assyria had grown weaker and hoped to get control of Judah and her neighbors, if they can keep Babylon at bay. So our word for today is hegemony, which means to exert political and social control over another nation. It is also pronounced hegemony, by the way. Either way works. Who will assume the political vacuum left by Assyria and enjoy hegemony over Judah, Philistia, Edom, Moab, Ammon, Aram? Will it be Babylon or Egypt? King Josiah of Judah made a fatal mistake in going out to battle against Egypt in the Megiddo Valley. Egypt was on their way to bolster Assyria near Carchemish in 609 BC. When Judah was defeated and King Josiah killed, that's when Pharaoh Necho took King Jehoahaz as captive and installed Jehoiakim over Judah as a vassal king to Egypt that we just read about. That control by Egypt lasted about 4 years, until Egypt and Assyria were both defeated in mid-605 BC at Carchemish, and then Babylon descended quickly upon Judah and attacked them the same year. 2 Kings notes this. Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon quickly established that he was the new boss, not Egypt, over Judah and the surrounding nations. Nebuchadnezzar would have had separate, intensely serious meetings with all the kings of the nations in the area. As a king, would you even survive your meeting with Nebuchadnezzar? Or would you convince him that you're going to be an extremely loyal vassal and not ever rebel? Jehoiakim passed the test, and for 3 years he served as Nebuchadnezzar's vassal. That meant regular payments are being sent to Babylon. Egyptian control was over. Judah enjoyed not even a small short time of independence. But also at this time, Babylon took their first deportation of Jews to Babylon and some treasure. Daniel talks about this. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of the court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. The chapter goes on to list some of these in this first deportation, including young Daniel. And when I covered Daniel, we talked more about this chapter. So the first deportation was in 605, possibly into the year 604, when elite young men were impressed into Babylonian service like Daniel. Okay, back to King Jehoiakim, Babylon's new vassal king. 2 Kings 24 tells us that Jehoiakim served Babylon for a few years and then revolted about 601 BC. This also was when Babylon attacked Egypt at the Egyptian border, but this time, with the Egyptians' backs to their own nation, the Egyptians fought so desperately with every man available in the country that the Babylonian army was not able to prevail. The battle was really a draw, but really a victory for the Egyptians in that they saved their nation from Babylonian domination. Notice on this map that Egypt is a different color than of the Babylonian Empire. And it might have been this ability of Egypt to hold back and even damage the Babylonian army that encouraged Jehoiakim to rebel in Judah, which went against God's message through Jeremiah, who was preaching for Judah to submit to Babylon, the instrument of the Lord's discipline on them. Now, we need this background history to make sense of Jeremiah's message of submission to Babylon. Otherwise, we think of a scenario like December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, and our declaration of war against Japan, and the tremendous surge of volunteers into the armed services. Now, imagine if a Jeremiah-like person came preaching, submit to Japan, give them the whole Pacific region, submit to their demands. Well, that person would be viewed as a traitor to America and her independence. This was not the scenario for Jeremiah. For Judah, keeping their independence was not an option. The whole area had been under Assyrian hegemony for a long time. Now it was a question of being under the hegemony of Egypt or Babylon. So not like 1941 and Japan at all. Judah was not strong enough to defeat either Babylon or Egypt. It was just a fact of life in the ancient Near East that for the last 200 years, one superpower exerted their hegemony over the rest. Jeremiah's preaching to submit to Babylon was actually the best political choice, and that was borne out in time. Now, back to King Jehoiakim, who had rebelled against Babylon. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord his God. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, attacked him and bound him with bronze shackles to take him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also took to Babylon articles from the temple of the Lord and put them in his temple there. The other events of Jehoiakim's reign, the detestable things he did, and all that was found against him, are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jehoiachin, his son, succeeded him as king. When Jehoiakim rebelled against Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar reeled him into Babylon in chains. His second scary meeting with Nebuchadnezzar. Worse, because he had broken his promise to Nebuchadnezzar. So did Jehoiakim even survive this second meeting? Well, he not only survived, we find him next in Jerusalem as king again in the book of Jeremiah. But he's none the wiser, still scheming against Babylon. Now, I heard that the Oscars, or the Academy Awards, were held recently for best films and actors. Too late to nominate Jehoiakim, who amazingly fooled a sharp leader like Nebuchadnezzar twice by his acting that from henceforth he would be a non-rebellious vassal. But Jehoiakim cannot dodge Babylon forever. In 598 BC, Nebuchadnezzar mobilized and came to Jerusalem to finally reckon with Jehoiakim and Jerusalem. He was not going to be nice. Which brings us to what Jeremiah said about Jehoiakim. Therefore, this is what the Lord says about Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. They will not mourn for him. Alas, my brother, alas, my sister, they will not mourn for him. Alas, my master, alas, his splendor. He will have the burial of a donkey, dragged away and thrown outside the gates of Jerusalem. So yes, Jehoiakim was allowed to return, but he brought upon Judah and Jerusalem the full wrath of Babylon for his rebellion again. He died in 598 BC, not long before Nebuchadnezzar arrived in force. It's pretty clear that Jehoiakim was killed by his own people or leadership, because he only brought upon Judah disaster. They threw him outside the gates of Jerusalem, an ignominious and shameful death for a Judean king. Nebuchadnezzar arrived in 598 BC, and their siege succeeded by mid-March 597. Jehoiakim's son, Jehoiachin, has just started reigning. Oh my! And to think he probably once looked forward to kingship, but this was not a propitious time to come to power. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months and 10 days. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord. In the spring, King Nebuchadnezzar sent for him and brought him to Babylon, together with articles of value from the temple of the Lord, and he made Jehoiachin's uncle Zedekiah king over Judah and Jerusalem. All right, let's read 2 Kings on this. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father had done. At that time, the officers of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, advanced on Jerusalem and laid siege to it, and Nebuchadnezzar himself came up to the city while his officers were besieging it. Jehoiachin, king of Judah, his mother, his attendants, his nobles, and his officials all surrendered to him. In the 8th year of the reign of the king of Babylon, he took Jehoiachin prisoner. As the Lord had declared, Nebuchadnezzar removed the treasures from the temple of the Lord and from the royal palace, and cut up the gold articles that Solomon, king of Israel, had made for the temple of the Lord. He carried all Jerusalem into exile, all the officers and fighting men, on all the skilled workers and artisans, a total of 10,000. Only the poorest people of the land were left. Babylon retakes Jerusalem in 597 BC. Jehoiakim's body was rotting outside one of the gates, and Jehoiachin surrenders. But as 2 Kings says, only after Nebuchadnezzar comes to the walls from his headquarters and talks him out, probably guaranteeing the lives of the king and his family. I'm sure Nebuchadnezzar knew that this new king was just 18 years old and had just become king. It sounds like Nebuchadnezzar saved the royal family from his besieging soldiers. So in these verses, we have the second deportation. We saw the purpose of the first deportation: take smart young men back to be trained and form an advisory group for the Babylonian king. The purpose of this second deportation was at least twofold. First, to break up any future rebellion against Babylon from Judah. And second, Babylon used their labor in some needy place in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar had enough of the Jehoiakim dynasty. The son, Jehoiachin, would not reign. But in his interviews, more scary meetings, he found a brother of Jehoiakim who would do, Zedekiah, and he was installed. Now, in 1860, archaeologists discovered many Babylonian clay tablets near ancient Nineveh, and they were stored in the British Museum. A few decades later, they were able to start translating them, but this one about Nebuchadnezzar was not translated until 1956, almost 100 years after it was found. Listen to the 597 BC attack and second deportation according to Nebuchadnezzar's scribes. In the 7th year, the month of Kislevu, the king of Akkad, that is Nebuchadnezzar, mustered his troops and marched to Hatti-land and besieged the city of Judah. And on the 2nd day of the month of Adaru, or February-March, he seized the city and captured the king, that's Jehoiachin. He appointed there a king of his own choice, there's Zedekiah, and received its heavy tribute and sent to Babylon. So all this was recorded without any sensationalism or exaggeration. The news was good enough. And so we've accomplished our mission of covering these three kings in Jeremiah's time. So thanks for staying with me through all this historical information. No quiz today. But what remains is to make some spiritual sense of this. Through this time of these last four kings, the people, leaders, the priests, and the false prophets resisted what God was doing, except that small, faithful remnant. It wasn't just the kings and religious leaders, though they get a lot of press. The people of Israel and Judah have provoked me by all the evil they have done. They, their kings and officials, their priests and prophets, the people of Judah, and those living in Jerusalem. The Lord said to Jeremiah, I have made you a tester of metals, and my people the ore, that you may observe and test their ways. They are all hardened rebels. They are bronze and iron. They all act corruptly. The bellows blow fiercely to burn away the lead with fire, but the refining goes on in vain. The wicked are not purged out. God kept applying the heat of discipline, but it didn't do any good. Judah has, in a real sense, forced God's hand against them. See, I will refine and test them, for what else can I do because of the sin of my people? Now, isn't that an intriguing and sad statement? What else can I do, the Lord says, but send his judgment? Judah added so much unnecessary pain to themselves. For 23 years, from the 13th year of Josiah, son of Ammon, king of Judah, until this very day, the word of the Lord has come to me, and I have spoken to you again and again, but you have not listened. And though the Lord has sent all his servants, the prophets, to you again and again, you have not listened or paid attention. And you have aroused my anger with what your hands have made, and you have brought harm to yourselves. So not only will Babylon rule over them, but Judah practically forced Nebuchadnezzar to implement their policy of deportation to nullify all that rebellion from Jerusalem. It would be a whole lot easier for Babylon not to keep coming back and reconquering than taking people back. Better that the people just accept the new reality and be compliant. Jeremiah, again, on this. If, however, any nation or kingdom will not serve Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, or bow its neck under his yoke, I will punish that nation with the sword, famine, and plague, declares the Lord, until I destroy it by his hand. So do not listen to your prophets. You will not serve the king of Babylon. That's their message. They prophesy lies to you that will only serve to remove you far from your lands. Listening to those false prophets will only get you kicked out of your homeland. But if any nation will bow its neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon and serve him, I will let that nation remain in its own land, to till it and to live there, declares the Lord. So these captivities don't have to be. A picture comes to mind. When Saul or Paul was persecuting Christians, the Lord showed himself in a bright vision to him, and Paul related, "We all fell to the ground, and I heard a voice saying to me in Aramaic, 'Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads.'" Now, a goad was a pointed stick to prod animals forward. We still say someone is goading us if they keep putting pressure on you to do something. But to kick back against that pointed stick is painful. The Lord was saying to Judah, stop hurting yourself in fighting my leading. Well, next class, Lord willing, we have one more king, Zedekiah. Will he continue the same rebellious pattern, or will he finally listen to Jeremiah and just accept the obvious reality that Babylon is the new master of the Near East? Thanks very much.